Hi everyone, this is Cami Westall with a brief overview and summary of Chapter 4 in your Spielvogel text called The Hellenistic World. And this text follows up on the conquests of the Greek territory, largely led by the Macedonians, who, as you can see, Athens and Sparta are further south here. Macedon or Macedonia is a little farther north. Sometimes fought with Greeks and were considered Greeks and sometimes not. They are spared of a lot of the infrastructure damage in the Peloponnesian War because they are farther north. And it discusses on page 100 how Philip of Macedonia is able to conquer the Greeks in 338 BC. Philip was a slave before in Macedonia, and so he spent in Thebes, which is in Greece. So he spent some time there before and had the ability to observe some of the Greek techniques, and he takes those and he improves on them a little bit. He uses his infantry. They still use the phalanx position a good bit, but he's got a very, very long spear that his guys use, close to 20 feet long, about 18 to 20 feet long, so they're able to break through their opponents at a farther distance. They are also using catapults. They use horses for the cavalry. So new techniques enable the Macedonians to defeat the Greeks, who have had a very difficult time trying to unite together. Philip takes over, but his reign is short-lived because 2 years later, in 336 BC, he will be assassinated by one of his bodyguards, and that opens the door for his son, Alexander the Great, to take over. Alexander's only about 20 years old at that time, born in 356 BC, and he's going to continue what his dad wanted to do in taking over that Persian Empire, which is a lot of modern-day Iran, and he goes all the way to what is modern-day India. He is an ambitious young guy. From the beginning, he really feels that he has to prove that he is worth this high position. His dad's top generals didn't really trust him because he's young. The Greeks didn't trust him because he's Macedonian. So he really has to give 110% every single day to prove that he is worthy as a ruler. And he does, and he establishes a huge empire, defeating the Persians, going down into Egypt, as you see here, Alexandria named for him. Go back up through the Indian territory. Here his soldiers say, all right, Alexander, we got to turn home. They've been gone for years. They start to head home, but note that Alexander dies in 323 BC before he's able to return home. So he has this huge empire. He had a bad fever, was exhausted. His exhaustion couldn't have helped at all. His high alcohol rate, probably all contributing factors in the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. And now there's this huge empire, and one of the key things that happens then, as the book goes on to explain, is there's a transition. There's a fusion of cultures that occurs. We had the Hellenic period, the Greek period, to now sort of a Greek-like period. Greek traditions will spread into the Persian region and Egyptian region, and also those traditions will come back to Greece. Alexander had he himself and his soldiers married women from other areas. You therefore have mixed marriages producing offspring with traditions from different cultures. You're bringing back animals and weapons from different worlds. So it's quite a cultural legacy that is left behind by Alexander. and now we enter in this kind of combined culture Hellenistic period. So the Hellenistic period usually marked with Alexander's empire and what he was able to accomplish in his death. After that, I just turned the page on my book, and on page 106 in my book I have a squished bug. That's kind of disturbing. Anyway, it then moves on to talk about these kingdoms established in the Hellenistic period. It was too impractical to have one ruler, and he didn't designate a successor because he didn't know he was going to die before he got back home. So a lot of people are going to struggle to fight for power when there's not that named successor. So it was some of those kingdoms, the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, especially powerful there, and some of the different institutions. The importance of Hellenistic cities is then brought up on page 109. Alexandria in Egypt became the capital of his empire, but these were very cosmopolitan areas. Alexandria was the largest city, huge lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Also a library that many people lament that was later destroyed, but very famous, world's largest library with all of its ancient records had been there in Alexandria as well. So these urban centers that are starting to take off in the Hellenistic period. I mentioned some of the economic trends, and with such a big empire and people more familiar with one another, that will expand your trade routes and commerce during that time period. Opportunities for women are mentioned. Upper class women, that's key. Lower class women, life still pretty much sucked. But for some of the more aristocratic women, there were new opportunities in education, and rare situations even in politics. But more female participation in the arts and education that we see. Slavery still a part of this ancient world, and used, so many war captives from different places, many used in homes, as you see. Talks about education, the literature of the time, still a number of accomplishments there. The art becoming a little bit more lifelike in a way, still a lot of good technicality involved, but a lot more emotion depicted in the art of the time period. Tons of accomplishments in science and medicine. You had Archimedes, the man who famously declared Eureka, which means I've found it. So a lot of people would later use that in discovering gold and things like that. But had Archimedes' war invention relied very much on use of the lever, that famous phrase that may not, well, at least according to legend, he said, "Give me a lever and place to stand on, and I will move the earth." People recognized that the earth was round. It has Eratosthenes who measured the circumference of the earth, proving that, we'll get there later, but a myth that most people thought the earth was flat when Columbus sailed. Geometry, the Hippocrates, who still take the Hippocratic oath if you become a doctor. Medicine changes, and new philosophies as well, as people are trying to find this inner tranquility, this ataraxia, or this inner happiness. So people are searching for that as they continue to do so today. Again, kind of a common psychology. Mentions the Epicureans. These are your pleasure seekers. This famous cookbook called the Epicurean Cookbook. It's been out for years and years and years. But they didn't want to have this emotional turmoil, as it says on page 119. They wanted to release themselves from daily concerns. So these were kind of your eat, drink, and be merry type of people. And Stoics as well, who, if someone is considered a Stoic today, they kind of come across a little bit as apathetic. These are people who say, all right, our way of being happiness is just sort of accept your lot. Don't be moved by the emotional ups and downs that life can throw at you. So new philosophies there with this fusion of culture, new religions, the mystery religions that are developed with this blend of different cultures as well. So a time of change with the Greek influence expanding, and also the expanding of the culture of the culture of other cultures, that's a little redundant, expanding into the Greek world, and so sort of this blend that will change a lot of the ways that the world works. So that was your brief overview of chapter 4.